Address our students who come from 100 colleges across the country is Professor Robert Murphy. He is the author of The Politically Incorrect Guide to Capitalism. He has his Ph.D. in economics from New York University and is a former professor at Hillsdale College. He's now an adjunct scholar with the Ludwig von Mises Institute and an analyst at the Laffer Associates. Please welcome Dr. Robert Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Schlafly. Well, it's great to be here, and this is a very exciting event. I'm sure you guys are enjoying it, and even we authors are enjoying it, hearing people talk about their areas of expertise. But I have to admit, it's a bit sort of depressing, because I know what I do in my book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to Capitalism, is I go through and how everything you hear in your schools and in the mainstream media about the free market is just dead wrong, both theoretically, that if you just listen to the claims that you hear over and over and just think about it, even if you had been locked in a room for your whole life and then just heard these claims, that they're internally inconsistent, they make no sense on the face of it. And then also the historical record that they point to back up these claims is just wrong. The things they tell you about history aren't true. And so I know that in my area, for when it comes to the free market and how a capitalist system works, but when I hear these other people talking, I realize that that's true in all of their areas of expertise also, that basically everything you're learning at school is wrong. And so you sort of raise the question, like, what the heck are you guys getting out of college? And I hope you learn how to throw a good party. Maybe that's a reason to go. But so in my book, there's plenty of topics, and in the interest of trying to compete with these people over here, let me try to focus on some of the more shocking and outrageous things that I talk about. I think one to focus on is discrimination. So I'll talk about that, and I realize we're on a time constraint, so I will leave time at the end for questions. So when it comes to discrimination, I think we first need to be clear on exactly what we mean, because a lot of people throw around related terms like racism and discrimination and prejudice. And so when people talk about what would happen in a purely free market that the government doesn't regulate, and then compared to what we have in our great system now because of the benevolence of wise politicians in the past and the laws that they passed, I think we need to be clear. So most people they don't have a problem with racism or prejudice per se, as long as it didn't influence your outward behavior. And so, suppose I'm walking around and I just really hate people from Switzerland. I can't stand them. But you wouldn't know that from talking to me, okay? And that in my behavior when I hire people and when I make decisions where I go to eat and things like that, you had no idea that I harbored this inner prejudice. Then I think most people would say, okay, you shouldn't be penalized for that, because that really would be thought control. And even most of our opponents at least would say that we're not in the business of thought control. Some people would probably argue with that claim, but I think that most of them would admit that no, we're not trying to penalize what goes on in your head. We're trying to make sure you don't act unfairly and really harm someone else's livelihood. So really what we're talking about when we talk about what sort of things is the government supposed to make sure don't happen that would happen if we had a free, unregulated market, really the term would be discrimination, where someone is treated unfairly because of perhaps the prejudices or racism harbored by the person with power. And so before we really analyze that, though, let me give you some examples just to clarify our thinking here. So some of you may have watched the movie The Hours, and it was a successful movie, and I watched it because my wife liked it, but I have to admit I liked it as well. That it was a chick flick, I'm not going to lie to you. And there's a very star-studded cast of actresses, and one of them was Nicole Kidman, was playing the role of, she was Virginia Woolf, the author. And now what if when they were casting for that role and they had people coming in and Nicole Kidman came in and other famous actresses may have come in and read for the part. Suppose Dustin Hoffman walked in and he had the script and he was getting ready to read for the part, and you can imagine people would have been sort of uncomfortable, and they would have there would have been people talking and whispering, and he starts reading the lines, and they go through it and say, well, thank you, Mr. Hoffman, really respect your work, but I don't think you're right for the part. And suppose he kept pressing them, and he said, what, you think I'm a bad actor? You don't like the way I read that line? You didn't believe that I was really into the character? And eventually the answer would have to be, well, no, you're a man, and you can't possibly hire you for this position. And he could say, no, I could play a woman. I was in Tootsie. Didn't you like what I did there? right? So he can convincingly play a woman, and again, though, you think, well, no, because if we cast you, that would just distract people. They'd be watching the movie and they would know it was you, and it just wouldn't fit. And so really, if you think about it, the reason he would be denied that job is that he was a man. That would be the fundamental reason. I mean, they might try to dress it up, but that would be the reason. Now, is that unfair sexual discrimination? Is that something that we need to pass laws against? Most people wouldn't be too outraged over that. And you would say it's not just that Dustin Hoffman is a famous actor and he's rich and he doesn't need the law to protect him. I mean, even if you look at community theater where people were struggling and eating ramen every night of the week and they were trying to get a part, if someone were trying to play a historical figure and wanted to be something that they weren't, probably people wouldn't think that was outrageous. And that's not what we mean when we say we're against the sort of discrimination that would happen allegedly in a purely free market. Another example, and I'm not the first to mention this one, if you look at the NBA, obviously the proportion of black players there is far greater than their sample in the population at large, or their proportion in the population at large. And is that prima facie evidence of rampant bias in the NBA? And most people, again, would say probably not. Now, if you do talk to some people, and I'm certainly not the caliber myself, but I know some people who played professional sports and upper-level college sports, and they do say that, yeah, there are biases, and that if you're a white guy, that it's harder for you to make it a certain basketball team. I can't confirm that, like I say, but there is that. But I think the overall majority of the population would believe that, no, there's not rampant, outrageous discrimination in the NBA, that there are other reasons that lead to that outcome. It's not discrimination. All right, so there's all kinds of cases like this that you can go through that, there aren't that many women probably who are coal miners, things like that. And it's, again, not necessarily that it's because of just pure discrimination. So you can go through all kinds of cases like that. So what is it exactly that people mean when they talk about discrimination? So we know it's not merely the fact of making a hiring decision based on someone's characteristics, their race or their sex, because the Dustin Hoffman case proves that, well, no, that's not really what it is. And then it's also not just if the pool of your employees don't exactly mirror those ratios that are in the population at large, because that's the NBA case rules that out. And so really, if you push somebody and you say, what is it that you're afraid would happen in a free market that you think is really unfair and we need to have laws against it, if you push them to be really specific, I think they would have to say, okay, if you had two candidates and one of them could do whatever the job was in better than the other candidate, and again, taking all the factors into consideration, really, if one candidate would give more to the firm's bottom line, if this candidate would be more productive, and the employer, because of his prejudice, hired the other candidate, then that's what we mean by discrimination, okay? And that's what needs to be penalized, either fined or even having jail terms, what have you, that was what would happen in a free market, and that's what the government needs to protect us from. Okay, but if that's what we mean by discrimination, well then those laws are superfluous because the free market automatically penalizes that.